Hello YouTube, welcome to this new Educated Barbarian analysis. We're starting with a brand new book today that is most likely going to last us a very long time, potentially up to a year. What we're working on today is the Hagakure. So as far as this book goes, I highly recommend you read it before you listen to my analysis, because I might taint the knowledge and the wisdom that you could be receiving from the book if you approached it with your own perspective and your own bias. The reason why I picked this book was A, because it's in continuity with the Book of Five Rings. It's about Bushido, it's about the samurai spirit, but also because it offers a different perspective on Bushido. One thing that I really appreciated with Musashi's book is that it was short, so it was a good introduction for the people on this channel who are not familiar with that type of literature. It was also a good way for me to introduce literature reviews, which is one of my passions. It's what I studied in school, and it's what I'm really good at, while also providing a type of perspective and an approach to teaching and to passing on wisdom that was extremely peculiar, because the way Musashi does it is that he gives you keys. He tells you that there is a potential in certain aspects, and that if you want to explore it and gain your own knowledge, it's up to you. But he's doing his best to not be a tyrant about it. He's not your average teacher. And it's something that you rarely find in that type of books. And this is the exact opposite. The Hagakure has a much more rigid, much stricter approach to etiquette and the Bushido and the path, the road, the way of the warrior. If you watch my videos about Musashi, you will know that what Musashi considered to be the way of the warrior was a very vague term on purpose. This book is not that. This book is going to define exactly what you should be doing. It's going to give you strict lines of conduct, and I personally resonate with that type of dialectics. Some people won't, but I want you to understand that I'm going to approach that analysis from that perspective, meaning that I'm not going to sugarcoat what is said in the book. I'm going to read straight up what is said, and I'm going to give you my interpretation of it. So this is going to be a much more authoritative approach to Bushido and what makes a man, what makes a warrior. So understand that as you watch this series, because I'm going to be very direct, much more than I was when I read the Book of Five Rings. So as far as the context for this book, because I gave the context for the Book of Five Rings and Musashi, this book is attributed to Yamamoto Jocho. There are certain sources that prove that he did not read the entire book, but the idea is that basically the person who wrote that book was what is called a retainer. He worked for a domain and for a shogun or a warlord, and he was completely devoted to that warlord, and therefore his writings and his spirituality and his wisdom is deeply tied to that. A lot of it is about devotion. It's already a problem because I personally I put freedom first, and the idea that someone could become completely entranced by someone else to the point where they're willing to lay their life down, I can sort of understand in certain contexts, in the context of a romantic partnership, but it's tough to understand for people like us when it comes to the hierarchical relationships that existed in feudal Japan. Because nowadays, I mean, how many people are willing to die for their boss, right? Almost none. Why? Because we don't have any reason to. Back in the days, it wasn't like that. So keep that in mind as we go through the book, because this is the context. This is someone who is writing to people of his domain, the Nabashima clan, to explain to them how they should behave, to make sure that the clan survives, thrives, and that the shogun and the authority that governs that portion of Japan never disappears. All right, it's a perpetuation of power that is supported by the samurais. As far as the themes that will be found in this, you're going to have Buddhism, Shintoism, Confucianism, all of these are mixed because they all make up Bushido. Bushido is a martial, it's a martial rule of conduct, but it's even more than that. It could be compared to a religion, and I think that a big thing that's going to be is going to be what is the term? Exemplified by the reading that we're going to go through with this book is a clear picture of what Bushido is, because just reading a description might not be enough. This is going to provide clear examples. And I'm going to start by reading the introduction of the book that was not written by Jocho, but that to me gives a clear idea of what it's about. Bushido tends to stir people's imaginations. The term is synonymous on the one hand with strength, masculinity, fearlessness, honor, and transcendence, and on the other, callousness and cold-hearted brutality. The most visible vestige of samurai culture in the modern age is Budo, that is the Japanese traditional martial arts. So, those aspects of Bushido that were described here will be found in the book and so much more. You're going to see that it really extends in every single direction in life. It's not just about training, it's not just about fighting and killing others, it's not just about being alpha, it's also how to lead your life on the spiritual and on the physical side. So you can expect certain paragraphs or segments of the book to not really be related to lifting. Whereas with the Book of Five Rings, because it was so short, I was able to really focus on that. But in this case, because this is much more of a book of advice than it is something vague enough that I can relate it to lifting, I'm also going to start talking about things that for me can be beneficial to hear about when it comes to leading a good life. So I'm going to not discriminate, I'm going to read every single thing, even if I disagree with it, and if I disagree, I will explain why, but I want to really make that reading worth listening to for you. So we're going to jump straight into that now that the introduction is finished. And the way I did it was fairly simple. I just read through the book, and every time I saw something of value, I highlighted it, and I'm going to read it to you and then discuss it. And so it starts in the chapter called The Idle Talk in the Dead of Night. It is incomprehensible how warriors these days have forgotten the magnitude of these historical events and even revere unrelated lords instead. Sakayamuni, Confucius, Kusunoki Masanari, and Takeda Shingen were never a part of the Ryozushi Nabeshima Brotherhood and are not compatible with the customs of our domain. Right off the bat is something that shows the spirit of the author, of the person who wrote those lines, whoever he might be. That person is saying that he does not understand why warriors that are his contemporary, keep in mind he's quite old and he stopped serving, that's a detail that's important. He's not a samurai anymore. The person who wrote that book is a monk. He retired from the life of a samurai when his master died. He tried to kill himself with fire. He was stopped because the practice was not legal at the time, and therefore he just renounced life and he became a monk. And he's describing how the warriors, the young warriors he sees, take for role models, samurais or historical figures that were not part of the clan. And for him, if you're not part of the clan, then you're not worth being followed. You should not be a role model for people who are part of the clan. This is a very exclusionary and discriminatory practice, right? It's so strange, and yet you still see it to this day. You will still see it in YouTube Fitness, where people will tell you, people have schools where they follow one thing, they follow that program or that approach, and anyone who doesn't do that is not worth listening to. And that's dangerous, because it's communitarism. It is something that we as humans tend to do. We tend to gather ourselves in groups, and anyone who's not part of the group is a danger or he's potentially malicious. And you can see that even back in the days it was the case. Disciples of a school or tradition venerate the master of their style. But retainers of the Nabeshima clan need not study anything outside the domain. Only after becoming familiar with the lore of our own principality it is permissible to learn other things. So the idea is that before you can fully approach, or before you should be allowed to approach other sources of knowledge, you should master the knowledge of your forefathers. Some people to this day still agree with that. I don't necessarily disagree. It's always interesting to see that certain countries are being criticized because they refuse to teach the history of other countries. But those other countries don't have that type of dilemma in their heads. They teach about their countries, which to me makes sense. The children who grow up in the country need to learn about the country to get to love it, right? Because if you don't understand something, you won't love it. And you need to have that pride in you to live in that place, and therefore you need to be taught about that place. So that's in a sense what he's saying here. Before you start muzzing around and trying to see if the grass is greener somewhere else, at least check out the grass where you are. With such strong bonds of fealty, being born into this clan and basking in the magnificence and compassion passed down through generation bears a depth of gratitude, which can hardly be expressed with words. That to me relates to gratitude. That is a very important feeling in Bushido and still in modern Japan to this day. A lot of people don't know that, but when Japanese people say itadakimasu, it doesn't mean bon appetit. It's not the equivalent of just saying have a good meal. It's the equivalent of saying grace. You know, when Christians hold hand and they sanctify the food and they thank the Lord for receiving the food, that's what it is. Itadakimasu means I receive. It's a way to, in a sense, bow down to the food and give thanks and gratitude to the food because you're about to consume it. And most of the time, things that you're eating used to be alive. They gave their lives for you. So you thank them because you're receiving their lives so that yours can continue. That's what he's trying to express. And that gratitude towards the country, towards what he calls the clan here, is super important. A lot of people just don't even think about it. How grateful we should be to be born on this earth. If you're born in a first world country, you should be thanking your lucky star every single day because you were born in a very, very privileged place on earth. The percentage of chances of you being born in one of the richest countries on earth is minimum. You could have been born in a terrible country somewhere where you would have died of starvation by the time you're 4. Doesn't mean that you have to humiliate yourself and prostrate yourself and feel shame. You should feel the opposite of shame. You should feel incredibly pride that you are able to live there. That's what he's trying to convey. You are born in the clan that is so magnificent and compassionate, that you should always have that depth of gratitude within you that cannot be expressed because it's such a strong feeling. No particular talent is needed. In a word, all that is required is the fortitude to declare that you alone will shoulder the burden of responsibility. It's his way of saying that there's no such thing as fate, right? You're not born to do a certain thing. Just because you were not born with the right cards doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. What you need is just this. It's the ability to take on the burden of responsibility. And we all have that choice. You can live a life with no responsibility. You can. But that also means that you're going to have minimum freedom because freedom comes with responsibilities. The people who have the most responsibilities have the most freedom. But they also take the most risks because if something goes wrong, it's up to you to fix it. And if you can't, it might be your head. It's the same thing here. if you want to live your life as a dependent and having other people take decisions for you, that's fine. But understand that it is going to come at the cost of your freedom. And no talent is needed. This is why I picked that book. It's something that comes again and again, where Jocho will explain again and again that the fortitude of the mind will always trample the abilities of the body, be them natural or not. As is usually the case with a man's training, one will not succeed without being utterly believing in your true worth as a man. 100% agreed. There is no point in training if you think to yourself, oh, this will lead to nothing. And it goes beyond just the metaphysical aspect of it. If you do curls and you think to yourself, oh, this will not grow my biceps, it's not going to magically blunt the damage you do to the muscle fibers and the protein synthesis, but it's going to make it so that the spirit of fire that you're going to have to be able to continue that practice for years and years will not be there, because you're selling yourself short. And this is so prevalent. So many young men start in that endeavor of becoming better, and the idea in their head as they start, instead of thinking, wow, I'm at the very start, I'm going to be great, I'm going to push my limits, they immediately think, oh, I'm not that great and I'm going to max out in like 2 years. Of course, this spirit is not going to lead to greatness, because how could it? If your spirit cannot imagine or create the image of greatness in your mind, it's not going to happen in real life. This is a given. And because this is the first video, we're going to do 2 other paragraphs and then we're going to move on. Like the axiom Yakan Dochin, searching for the way in a kettle, one's feelings can run hot and cold, but there are attitudes that should never be forsaken. Searching for the way in a kettle it's a throwback to Musashi, who said that the way was in the void. The way of the warrior is in the void, meaning what? It's everywhere. Because the void is nowhere and everywhere. You can sharpen your spirit and keep advancing on the way every single day. It doesn't mean to be in the gym. It doesn't need to be when you're faced with challenges. But there's going to always be a point where all of the practice you do in everyday life is going to translate into your ability to advance on the way. You are a warrior 24/7, even when you sleep. Keep that in mind. And as he says, your feeling can run hot and cold. You can be sad, you can be happy, you can feel desperate, but you never leave the way, ever. Your feelings do not correlate with that higher state of being that is the pursuit of physical and spiritual greatness. This should always be actual, it should always be there. The following is my own professed oath, and this is something that if I were you, I would take notes. Maybe you're going to buy the book, but this is a profoundly interesting oath, and this is an oath that I do believe if you repeat it to yourself every day, and you end up believing in it and you end up keeping it in your heart, it will make you unstoppable. It goes as follows. I will never fall behind others in pursuing the way of the warrior. I will always be ready to serve. I will honor my parents. I will serve compassionately for the benefit of others. For me, this encompasses everything. You will never fall behind others in pursuing the way of the warrior, meaning what? Who cares if someone is more talented than you? Who cares if they go faster than you? Who cares if you had a setback? Who cares if you're 35 and you're just getting started? It's about you. You work, right? You're not comparing yourself to others. The only thing that matters is your spirit and the will to never stop. And this is what it says here. You will not fall behind others in pursuing the way, not accomplishing. You might fall behind in accomplishing, that's fine. You might work super hard and never reach the level of someone else. but in the pursuing of the way of the warrior. This is where you should never lose. In your efforts, in your hard work, if you refuse to be defeated when it comes to putting in efforts, you're going to find that eventually greatness will be there. For everyone, there is no exception. I will always be ready to serve. You will always be ready to offer yourself. You will always be productive. I will honor my parents. You will show gratefulness to the people who put you on this earth. And I understand that this one is potentially not super accurate for some people who didn't have the best parents or who just didn't have parents. But I want you to think about this in a deeper way. It goes deeper than just mom and dad who fed you when you were a baby and who took care of you. If you have that and you can feel that love and passion for your parents and what they did for you, then great. But if you can't relate, then think about it in a broader term. You were brought to this earth. You were given life. And now it's up to you to do what you want with it. This is what it means. You will honor your parents. Well, what is your parents? Your parents is life. It's that connection that happened at some point that bring you here. You can call it a chemical reaction. I don't care. But there's something that happened at some point for you to be there. That's what you should be honoring, because when you honor that, what do you really do? You honor your own life. This is what we're talking about here. This is when you get to a point where you love yourself enough that you can celebrate the fact that you're here. And this is the start of everything. Once you have that, things unlock in your life. I will serve compassionately for the benefit of others. That's the last part, the most important part for me. I personally started pursuing strength and size for myself because I needed it to feel better about myself. But once I got that, I realized that not only did I feel better, I also felt like I could help others finally. When I was feeling down on myself and I had no confidence and no trust, and I wasn't self-assured, helping others never crossed my mind, because how could I help people when I can't even help myself? But now I'm to a point where it is possible. And I think we're going to stop here. We might have maybe one more page before the book one starts, because this is just the idle talk in the dead of night. So let's do the last one, which relate to the oath we just spoken about. By chanting these 4 oaths every morning and night to the deities, to Buddha, to whoever, you will become imbued with double your strength and will never lag behind. It is simply a matter of advancing forward little by little. Even the gods and Buddha started by pledging an oath of allegiance. I think this is self-explanatory. Every single paragraph of this book is a golden nugget of knowledge, and this is one of them. Everything you do in life starts with a thought, a pledge. Just like I did 10 years ago when I said, I'm going to get bigger. And this is where I am now. All of that started back then. It's all in the mind. It's all in the word you speak to yourself. And once it's spoken, once you've made that promise, you're on the right path. But you need to do that first before you do the action. So I'm going to leave you there. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to officially start the Hagakure and the book 1 next week. It is going to be a long adventure. I hope you're going to stick with me because there is so much to learn about this book. Thank you again. Have a good week.